All right, guys, we're back. In this video, we're going to talk about some of the mixing basics. I'm going to cover about as much as mixing as I can in this video, so let's just go ahead and get started. I think the first thing to know is the signal flow, and this is important because you got to understand like how the audio processes through FL Studio. So basically, it starts at the channel rack, and everything that you see here starts with this, like in terms of sound, starts with this, and then the sound goes through the mixer, through the mixing channels, through these, basically, and then through the master. And then it goes down. Okay, so it's like, it goes basically like boom, boom, and then boom. So this slot 10 here is the most influential like mixing slot, basically. Like whatever you put on here, it's gonna have a huge effect on the track. All right, and that's important to know. As you kind of like visualize like how you want to mix and how you want to add effects. So, and then there's EQ. So EQing is basically when you, I'll turn the EQ on the melody here. All right, hold on. Let's put these in the actual mixer slots. All right, so if you right click, you can solo. All right, so EQing, basically you can visualize the sound here and edit it. So you can see like this is the melody that you hear, and what you can do is, say you want to cut off the high end. Now you want to hear like the piercing higher part. It's not necessarily piercing, but it's almost like how I would describe high end. So you can modify sounds like that. And you want to, and the reason to do that usually is to like leave room for other sounds. So say you have like a snare that's hitting more in this higher end area, you could lower this so you could hear the snare more clearly. So that's basically how that works. EQing is a fine art, so just have fun with it. And yeah, you can use it on like say bass. We can go to bass here. And maybe the bass has too much high end for a bass. We could you can pick the different presets here. Oh yeah, I'm using Fruity Parametric EQ2. So replace Fruity Parametric EQ2. I think this is the most common and simple EQ that comes with FL. I like it because you can visualize it. That's why I like it more than the Fruity Parametric EQ. EQ2, you can actually like see the sound waves. So say with the bass, we want to cut off more of the high end. I'm sorry, this is not that. Let's try that again. With the, we want to cut off the high end. I was about to say, that didn't sound like it was that high. When I visualize this sound, this is a prime example of like I don't really need to do anything because there's not a whole lot of like higher end kind of creeping into this area. So this bass is really acting more like a bass. All right. So that's EQing. There's a lot to say about EQing, but that's basically EQing in a nutshell. Let's go to compression. So compression, we'll use the drum as an example. Let's see. Let's use kick. So if you want to make basically compression will compress a sound and kind of just make it louder. That's the best way I can describe it. It kind of like crunches it together and makes it louder. And you could use a tool like Fruity Compressor to do that. So again, you know, just find Fruity Compressor on here. Fruity Compressor. You can choose a preset. Say drums, and now let's turn it on. I'm sorry, man. Why do I still have that 808 selected? Okay, let's try it again. I don't know how that happened, but so we use drums. See, you just hear it knocking a little bit harder. So that's another rule of like why you always kind of want to turn the volume down on the sound in the channel rack before you take it into the mixer, because let's see here. Because you'll see like it's kind of creeping into this like clip area, which I'll talk about that in a second. If you just like turn it down in the channel rack before it goes into the mixer, see the kick here. So you can produce like a very unique but still like kind of bouncy sound. And I'd say like the you can kind of keep it like still below in the green here. I think when it's in the green, it produces best sound overall. But sometimes, you know, you want that effect where it's kind of like overdrawn. But yeah, you can turn it down here, add the compressor to be louder. It's an effect. And let me see here. And then you could always just like a general rule of thumb is two things is like, you know, listen with and without the effect and see if you like it more. So it'd be like, we heard how that sounds, or do we just like how it normally sounds? It's fairly similar. It's already in the green. I didn't necessarily think anything was wrong with the kick to begin with. So in that situation, I'd probably just keep it without compressing it. But, you know, once you start compressing, you got to compress. And compressing is something else, man. Compressing is something else. Yeah, compress it. I'm not a huge, I don't love compressing, but, you know, I'm still a student of the game myself. And it might be something I get more into. But I only compress usually like when I feel like a sound needs to more impact or sound. And then you can compress the entire track, of course. If you heard of like Fruity Soundgodizer is a very popular compression tool. And I'll just show you an example of what it does. So you turn this on. It really, really brings out a song. It has different presets. And the other thing to note is the mixing knob. So you might fall in love with Soundgodizer. Again, I use it every now and again. The other thing to know is the mixing knob, which is this knob here. So this is kind of like how much of an effect the effect has, basically. Like the effect is there, like the preset and tools are there, but if you turn this down, it's basically like not really on. That's what's known as the mixing knob, and the same mixing knob is also here. So I could also turn it down here. I'll use another example. We just did the compressor here. So let's see. Let's solo this. So if we turn down the compressor knob here, we're basically turning down the effect of the compressor. Now this is useful because I would say, like, especially when you're new to mixing, and kind of a philosophy I use still in general is like, when in doubt, kind of go with like less of an effect. So when in doubt, kind of maybe just tweak it down a little bit if you're unsure about, you know, how much of an effect you should have or something like that. In general, you can go with less. So like in this situation, you know, we got the kick boosted just a tad, so it's not like totally crazy. But if we just have it like way up here, that might be too much, but maybe you just need that little pinch to kind of keep it still in green or whatever. So it's a very effective tool, a very effective knob. The mixing knob is great, you know. And we talked about reverb. Hold on a second. Sorry, I have like allergies. We talked about reverb, I think in a previous video, but reverb is just like an effect. It's kind of like just another effect to widen a sound. And I talked about reverb in the last video. I'm not going to repeat that again. And that's it for this video. Next, we're going to kind of talk about panning, mono, and stereo a bit more. I touched a little bit on that, but I'm going to cover that in the next video. Peace out. See you soon.